Hey, it's Chris. Let's talk Boom, Cosmic Frog from Devious Weasel Games. This game is relatively new. It's just coming out. I believe it's being shipped to retailers, distributors right now. So if you're interested at all, now is the time to get more information. Let me tell you a little bit about what it is, how it plays, and my thoughts on it. First off, this is a weird theme. No doubt about it. If the cover itself wasn't a giveaway, this is not your typical romp around the woods or themes that you've seen elsewhere. You are a 2 mile high cosmic intergalactic hopping frog that is immortal, and you are trying to eat worlds. Then digest those worlds and regurgitate them into your own vault for safekeeping. I mean, you're basically the Superman villain, the Preserver in frog form. You know, the guy that was going around collecting worlds for his own collection so they could be, preserved and no one would be lost. Now, you might take a look at this and say, Chris, this just sounds like a different version of King of Tokyo. Well, you're kind of right. At the same time, it is completely different in terms of how it actually plays and what you're doing. Unlike King of Tokyo, this is not a game that is primarily driven by combat. There is a lot less randomness. There are dice, but they are used very seldomly, and there is a lot of mitigation that is available if you play your metaphorical cards right. What you're doing is you're hopping your frog from area to area, land to land, in and out of the sea of the vast nebulous that's known as the ether, trying to gobble up these lands and put them in your vault. And this is where the nuance comes in, is because these tiles are literally layered on the board, meaning you take the top layer off. The other nuance is that how you lay them in your vault determines the end game scoring. So the end game scoring is actually more like a 3D puzzle that you're trying to do consciously during the middle of the game as you're collecting these lands. And how you collect these lands determines the order in which you can put them in the vault, which determines how you're going to be able to line them up to get the most points at the end of the game. Sounds a little complex, right? Well, the actual gameplay itself is relatively straightforward. What they've done is they've taken the Aeon's End type deck construction in terms of turn order, and they've used that to maximize both the chaos, as you would expect in a game that looks like this, but also the control that you have. What I mean by that is, depending on the number of players, depends on how many turn order cards of your color get put in the deck. So for 4 frogs, each frog has 5 turn order cards. Those are all shuffled together, mixed up, and you draw them one by one. So you may end up with, cyclical turns, one after the other, or you may end up with 2 or 3 turns in a row, just like somebody else down the line. Now, you're also given ways to mitigate that by things called oomph, which is basically resource that you can spend, that you can recharge to get, and you can take an extra action at the end of your turn in order to do things. There's asymmetrical powers, as well as different actions that you can take during your turn, depending on if you're on the land or in the ether. Now, let me be clear. You only get one action per turn. So an extra action is considerably important. So what are my thoughts on it, having given you that brief synopsis, drone level overview of things? I really like it. Now, full disclaimer, I got a copy of Cosmic Frog from the publisher. So that in no way influences whether or not I like it, but I'll let you know right now, I wouldn't have asked him about it, or I wouldn't have contacted him if I hadn't been interested in the first place. That being said, until we got it to the table, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I read through the rulebook. The rulebook, this is one of my bigger criticisms, is very dense. It's easy to understand, but it's dense because they use a lot of terminology that at the beginning is not as intuitive as I would have liked, because they want to make everything unique and thematic in this game, and that almost hurts it in a detriment when you're trying to explain it, and when I tried to explain it to the gamers at my table. That being said, once you start playing it, the actions become much more intuitive, and what you're doing becomes really, really quick and easy, because like I said, on your turn, you're only getting one action, and then boom, next person, boom, next person, boom, next person, extra turn, boom, next person, shuffle, 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 and so on. This is probably one of the highest quality component-wise games that I have ever seen. Blessing and curse that it is, because the price point on pre-order is about $50 right now. So you're going to pay for what you're getting, a quality deluxe almost retail game. My one concern on that is these cardboard tiles, these little hexes of these lands that you're devouring, are so thick. They're 5 millimeters and 3 millimeters. The 5 millimeters, there's a couple that are starting to display even after a couple games. But the rest of it is absolutely amazing. The multi-layering of these lands and you being only able to harvest or swallow into your gullet, as it's called, the top layer is a very unique mechanism because how you score either with rows of the top lands that are the same color or rows of the lowlands of the same color. So you need ones of the same color, but you may not be able to get them because someone else may have already gotten that top layer or that middle layer. Now you can't harvest the bottom layer, but the bottom layer can be destroyed, and that's one of the end game conditions. The other end game condition is if everything gets harvested. What would I relate it to? Now, this is going to be an interesting comparison, and you may get a little lost in this, but I'm going to try to explain it in terms that at least make sense in my head. The closest thing I can relate it to in terms of games that I've played similarly is Blood Rage. Now, hear me out. The reason I say Blood Rage is because it's sort of like when you play Blood Rage the first time, if you're familiar with that at all, as an area control game that has battling. A lot of people, especially the first time or two that they play Blood Rage, they are very passive in a game like that, where the battling is not the first thing that people want to do. Sort of even like Scythe, if you will, where battling is sort of everyone's trying to do their own thing and be passive and not aggro against other people because of the turns that it's going to take to do and because of the risk of failure. And that is sort of what happened at first with Cosmic Frog. That everyone was so concerned about what they were doing that nobody was attacking each other. No one was knocking each other back. Now, let me be clear. You don't knock each other out of the game. You don't even steal things very easily. Let me be clear. This is not a game of battling, though. You have to have someone who is in the ether lose a battle to get knocked into this outer dimension before you can even contemplate being able to steal one of their lands from their vault. And even if you try and steal, you can still fail. So it's not as take that as it seems on the surface. But if you don't do it, the game plays very quickly and very surprisingly, depending on how you actually strategized. Having played it now, there are definitely things that we all agreed that we would do differently with subsequent plays. There would be much, much, much more interaction. Not, King of Tokyo level, to go back to that, or Blood Rage levels of interaction, but there would definitely be times and places where there was more interaction that would have been deemed necessary. And along with that, you have asymmetric abilities that are going to allow you to interact at the appropriate times. And those powers mutate and change randomly throughout the game. But you are, again, allowed to mitigate it. Every randomness is given a chance to mitigate in this game. Powers can be saved or even given the option of saved versus choosing something else. So it's not like you're automatically stuck with one that is bad for the whole game and underpowered or overpowered, or it's not like you don't have your choice going forward. But that's going to cost you, and it's going to cost you from being able to do other things down the line. So that's the balance that you have to make. If you've acutely been keeping track of how many of your own turn cards have been played, then you're trying to optimize when is the right time to spend the currency in the game that you have, because you can choose then to spend it either on another turn when you know you have several turns coming up in a row, or when you know other people do not have turns to take advantage of the fact that they do not have turns coming up. Or are you choosing to spend it to mitigate some effects that are going to take place, including an attack, which we have two ways of mitigating, or are you going to choose to mitigate, keeping a power versus using your own asymmetric power? I mean, there are asymmetric powers in this game that allow you to manipulate the ground, that allow you to manipulate the other players, that allow you to manipulate how much energy it costs for you to take additional actions. So all of that is deeply woven in to each and every single action turn that you're taking. When is the most opportune time to strike? And don't forget about that end game scoring in the vault, because there's several ways to approach that. You can stack your tiles so that if they're in a certain configuration, it allows you to get an energy that I just mentioned that you're spending that's so important. It allows you to get one of those back a turn. Or are you going to use them so that you're going to go for more scoring? Because when you stack them to create that siphon, as it's called, to get the energy back, you are losing points because of how the scoring actually happens. And so, which is the trade-off you're willing to make? This is the layers of nuance and depth that this game has that isn't always apparent on the first playthrough. And that's why I think it's initially much more than meets the eye, and why it's really worth a look, because I think those elements make it stand above a lot of the competitors in similar niches within this market. So what do I think of this game? This game is a very unique concept. It's a very unique execution. And to be honest with you, I was a little put off at the beginning with some of the setup, because you're placing these 84 barren tiles on the bottom, and you're placing a whole nother layer of tiles and another layer of tiles. It had a lot of setup. Was it worth it? Absolutely. Absolutely. This is... I don't play a lot of new games because I'm not up on the hotness, because I'm not getting publishers' copies sent to me all the time so I can play everything that comes out and everything hot under the sun. But I would say, pound for pound, that when this comes out, there are going to be people that are saying this is one of the best games of 2020. I'm willing to put my stamp of approval on it from that. Now, is it going to be for everyone? No, because there is some take that. Now, if you don't like the take that, there's nothing in the game that makes you attack other people, and you can't get knocked out, so there's no detriment in that regard. Also, getting knocked out into that outer realm actually allows you to stack your turns to, again, mitigate the loss that you may encounter by getting knocked out there in the first place. That being said, the endgame scoring is a little bit like a puzzle, and that's going to frustrate a lot of people, especially when they play it for the first time or two. The rule book actually states just try messing around with stacking the tiles and doing the scoring a couple times before you play, and there's a reason for that. It's in there because the scoring is not as intuitive as you're led to believe initially when you're glancing at it. So if you do anything else before you play, that is the one thing I would highly recommend. And all of us agreed that given a chance to go back and start completely afresh, that would be the first thing we do, because that would have changed how many of us scored that very first game. But what this game has, it has all of these separate elements, sort of a little bit of take that, a little bit of set collection, a little bit of tile laying with purpose, and it blends them beautifully. And it also has the randomization and the tactical nature that I love, that you cannot just long-term strategy without any interaction. Those games are not my forte. They are not my preferred type of game to begin with. And this game just hits on all cylinders of the mechanisms that I've already mentioned. That is why I think is going to be one of the best games of 2020. Now, granted, it may fly under the radar. I have not heard a lot of hype for this. I have not heard a lot of, hotness, or you have not seen it on the hotness track, and you may not. Do not mistake that lack of hotness with the lack of quality that this game truly is and deserves in the first place. And I'm not just saying this. Do not be mistaken. I am not just endorsing this game. Having played it now, having seen the depth that's there and just the fun that we had, and thinking already about what we would do differently next time, this game is not getting traded. It's not gonna, get sold from my collection. This is a keeper. That's how good I think it is. I'm willing to already say that. This is a keeper that I'm gonna keep. If this interests you, you need to check it out. I'm sure somebody will put out a rules or more of a playthrough. That is not my area of expertise. But there will be those out there because it's that good. So, if that interests you, check it out. You don't have to pre-order it, but keep it on your radar and check it out. As always, these are my own thoughts, my own opinions. If you like it, like, comment, subscribe me. I have a new Patreon. Check it out. I'm just trying to build a bit of a community, and anything you can do to support me is, as always, is super appreciated. So Let me know your thoughts, comments, concerns. Let me know what you want to see next. You'll notice the game under right now, The Loop. That is going to be the next game that I'm probably going to be talking about on the channel, along with maybe New York Zoo or Masters of Respect as an FYI, what's to come up next. And then, interspersed just videos of news, Kickstarters, and everything else under the sun. Let me know what you think about that as well. So if that interests you, stay tuned. Subscribe so that when I put my unboxing as well as my review out, you can be right on top of that as well. I think this is another game that has the potential for me personally to be one of my games of 2020. So as always, thanks for watching. Stay classy. Stay safe. Have a great Thanksgiving. Well, if you're in the US. If you're not, have a great day in November as well. Thanks, guys.